Good afternoon, everybody. If you're just coming on, welcome. We're going to start the webinar in just about a minute or two. And good afternoon to all of you. We're going to begin in just a minute. And looking forward to talking to you about this stuff. All right. Thank you all for being here today. Good afternoon to you. Happy Wednesday. We're talking today about what you need to know for Workforce 2021. The first part of this is going to be more California specific, and the back half is going to be general to everybody. A couple of things for you. Much of what I'm going to be talking to you is still being developed, fleshed out. We don't know a lot of the answers. One of the things that this crisis has produced is a sense of we don't know everything. For example, this happened, you can't exactly turn to page 37 of the HR playbook and find out the answers on how to solve these things. So a lot of this is still in development. We're going to give you the best information we possibly can. And we will do questions and answers. But again, if it's super specific to your organization, if it's something we don't know, I'm going to be forced to say you might want to talk to your HR advisor, your employment attorney, or somebody like that. If it's something we think is of value and it's important to you, then we'll write that down and see if we can't research an answer and send it out to everybody who participated today. Related to that, I am not a lawyer. Symmetry HR Outsourcing is not a law firm, so therefore we're not giving legal advice. What we're doing is giving you best practices, expertise, and hopefully we can help you streamline all and navigate all the issues that are going on today. So having said that, here's what we're covering today. The California and federal changes you really need to know about. There are more than 7, but these were the 7 we felt were most important to talk about in the context of today's webinar. Techniques to help you more effectively manage work from home employees. The pandemic has caused a reset on hiring and retention of employees. We'll give you a couple of tips on that. And then rebuilding your organization chart post-pandemic, which is going to be an issue for a lot of organizations. If you would like to ask questions, please use the Q&A form. Jamie Baker of my amazing team will be curating those questions and getting them to me just as soon as I can see them. And I also want to thank, because I'll forget it anyway, my amazing operations team who are all on here, Tiffany and Deb and Nicole besides Jamie. So thank you all very much. So deep breath. It's not over yet. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's clear that we can see it. We don't know how long that tunnel is. And the fact of the matter is that for businesses, the conclusion of this phase of the pandemic is only going to create more questions, and it's going to keep on going. And there's going to be complicated issues. And it may not be just, what does the law say? What does this regulation say? It may be, what morally should I do or can I do? And I'll give you an example of that. Federal guidelines came out today that basically said, yes, an employer can require employees to have a vaccination, proof of vaccination before returning to the office. But that doesn't necessarily apply to many states. There are numerous exceptions. People can do an exception based on their religious beliefs. So if you require vaccinations to come back to work and somebody says, I didn't get vaccinated, here's the religion I am. That just creates a whole nother set of problems. So it's not over yet. We're getting there. And I think once we get a 50 to 60% of the population vaccinated and inoculated, it's going to be a lot safer, but it's not going to be the same. So the 7 California-based regulations you need to know about. Workers' comp changes, there's a bunch of them. About a week and a half ago, a bunch of new Cal OSHA COVID regulations hit, and we'll go over those with you and walk you through them. Minimum salary thresholds for exempt employees changed January 1st, as does the minimum wage. California Family Rights Act has some significant changes that affect almost every business we work with. There's that pesky non-harassment training and also the pesky independent contractor 1099 issue. So let's get started with a couple of work comp issues. And the first one, which is in effect now, is Senate Bill 1159. And basically it says this: employees who suffer a COVID-related illness or death are covered almost always by work comp. And this goes back to July 7th of this year. Employers, and that means you, have to notify their work comp claims administrator whenever the employer knows or reasonably should know that an employee has tested positive. In any case, 3 days within the collection date. So you should reasonably know that an employee has tested positive. Now, having said that, who's covered under this? If you have an employee who has suffered an illness or death from COVID-19 and meets all of these requirements, they're covered. The employee is tested positive within 14 days from the time they last worked at your location. And the employee's positive test occurred during a COVID-19 outbreak at the place of employment. So those two things have to happen. They have to have worked within 14 days at your location, and there must have been an outbreak. So what is an outbreak? How is that defined? It's defined like this. If it occurred within 14 calendar days, if you have fewer than 100 or fewer employees, if you have 4 or more employees test positive, that's considered an outbreak. If an employer has more than 100 employees, it's 4% of the employees who went to that location, who worked at that location. Or if the county or a public health department shuts your business down because of due to infection or potential infection of COVID-19, that's considered an outbreak. If any of those things occur, you have to notify your claims administrator within 3 days or as reasonably certain as you've known. Okay, that needs water after that. In any case, it's usually best just to notify the workers' comp claims administrator anyway, but those are the regulations for that. That is in effect immediately, and it goes back to July. And then you have to notify your employees. So if you receive notice of a potential exposure, within 1 day, you must provide written notice to all employees and subcontractors who are on premises at the same work site within this period. So let me talk about this a little bit. If you have a standalone building and somebody says, gee, I was exposed to my neighbor's kid who just tested positive, that's a potential exposure. You should let all your employees know that somebody has been exposed. We get into confidentiality rights, privacy rights, things like that. Probably best not to say who has been exposed, but that there has been an exposure. If you share an office or an office building, my office in Encino is shared with a CPA firm, and it's part of a 6-story complex. And we frequently get from the property manager, somebody in the building has tested positive. They were last in the building on December 11th. Those are the types of things to know. And that's about all the information you have. But if you have notice of potential exposure, you should provide written notice to all employees or subcontractors. To me, that means, especially as we're seeing the acceleration of COVID tests that are positive, you should be prepared for this already. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it will. Two of our clients have outbreaks right now, and one of them is a white collar firm. Make sure you have everybody's email addresses or text messages so you can get that written notice to them. Make sure they're updated. Probably put together a model notice. Again, we've received notice that somebody has been exposed. That person is now quarantined, and they were last on the premises in such and such a date. We encourage you to get a test. If you need any other information, let us know. But have that in place, because what you don't want to do is you wouldn't want to be notified that somebody has an exposure and then scramble for 2 or 3 days trying to make sure that we have all the right email addresses for everybody or phone numbers or things like that. You want to make sure that happens quickly. So those are the notices related to work comp and to employees based on a positive test. In addition to all of this, Cal OSHA came out with new regulations, and they're effective immediately. They were in effect when they went into place earlier this month. And basically, the most important thing it says is every single employer must have and implement a COVID-19 prevention plan, which they call a CPP, in writing. There are several new requirements, but that's the biggest, most important thing. Every business must implement a COVID-19 prevention plan. The good news is at the end of this, we have a website where you can download this information. In fact, not only will you be able to download the model CPP, but you can have access to download at no cost to you a white paper that details all the things we talked about, probably in more detail than I'm doing right now. And you can get that as well. And there's no cost involved. So model CPP program must be in writing. It has to be done now. On January 1st, which is only 2 weeks and a day away, minimum wage changes. Now, when the state minimum wage changes, it impacts a lot of other things as well. But first of all, the state minimum wage change effective January 1st means on January 1st, if you have 25 or fewer employees, the minimum wage is $13 an hour. If you have more than 25 employees, the minimum wage in California is $14 an hour. Now, you may live or work in a location that has a higher requirement. City of Los Angeles, City of San Francisco, a lot of the Bay Area cities, a lot of counties have implemented their own minimum wage that is higher than the state minimum wage. Two things for you. Number one, whatever is more advantageous to the employee applies. So if the state says $13 an hour and your municipality says $15 an hour, guess what? You're paying them $15 an hour. And also, more good news for you, we have a minimum wage chart for you that you can also download, and we'll get that information to you at the end of this webinar as well. So that's the minimum wage change for all employees based on the size of your company effective January 1st. Now, when the state changes their minimum wage, it also changes something called the minimum salary threshold for exempt employees. Excuse me, so let me explain that. In California and many states, in order to be considered exempt, meaning you don't get paid overtime, you don't have to take meal breaks or rest breaks, you're exempt from those. It is based on two factors. One is your job duties. For example, if you're an executive of a company, you are considered exempt. If you're a manager and you manage 2 or more employees, you are generally considered exempt. There's a lot of different exempted, but it's basically primarily due on your duties and also how much money you're paid. So in California, the minimum salary threshold has increased effective January 1st. So if your business has 25 or fewer employees, to be considered exempt, an employee must make $54,080 a year or more and have duties such as an executive or managerial that would consider them exempt. Any employee who does not make that amount of money, no matter what, is automatically non-exempt, and you must pay them overtime and you must provide for their meal and rest breaks. $54,080 if you have 25 or fewer employees, and 58,240 a year if you have more than 25 employees. So it's really important to make sure that you're auditing the salary range of each of your employees, especially exempt employees, to make sure they aren't. Because as you probably know, wage and hour is one of the hottest topics still in employment law in the Western United States for sure. And if you go a couple of years without paying an employee overtime and that person turns out to have needed overtime, that's a lot of money plus taxes plus penalties. So make sure you're auditing that information. Maybe the most significant law that's changed that impacts more businesses than any is the updated California Family Rights Act. Now, this generally, and believe me when I say generally, we could spend 2 hours just on this law. We're not going to. That's why you have your HR advisor or your employment attorney. It is basically modeled, California Family Rights Act, basically modeled after the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, basically. Employers with 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius must provide up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for serious illness and illness of a family member, pregnancy, post-birth, things like that. Now, the California Family Rights Act has changed significantly. It's not just businesses with 50 or more employees, it's now businesses with 5 or more employees. And not only must you provide up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for somebody who has an immediate family member or their own serious illness, or again, pregnancy or baby bonding. Now, the expansion has included more family members. Now it includes grandparents, grandchildren, siblings, domestic partners, and adult kids over the age of 18. So if you have an employee who says, my 22-year-old I have to take care of because he or she has COVID, you must give that employee up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Now, there must be a job guarantee at the end of that, of course. You don't have to pay them, but you have to guarantee their job back. And that includes all of those definitions. So this radically expands the California Family Rights Act, and it impacts almost every business we have, unless you have fewer than 5 employees. So this is a significant change. And I am very broadly describing it to you. But this is something that, number one, needs to go into your employee handbook immediately. And number two, it has to be discussed with your managers, your HR team, your leaders, to make sure everybody understands what's going on. And if you're in HR, I will give you just a little gem that we just found out about. And again, this is what I say, these things keep on expanding the more we talk about them. If you have over 50 employees, you might have to administer FEMLA and SEFRA separately. Because let's say now that 22-year-old kid you're taking care of, well, that doesn't meet the requirements of family medical leave. So now you might have to take care of your sister or your 22-year-old for 12 weeks. That would be covered under SEFRA. But then if you get sick, FEMLA would cover you for another 12 weeks within that 12-month period. So now both of these must be administered simultaneously. So this is a major training issue. It's an employee awareness issue. If you're the HR team, you need to let your leaders know about this right away. And it's got to be included in the handbook straight away as well. So this is a significant legal change that impacts everybody. A reminder for non-harassment training, and we do this frequently. Have all your employees taken that mandatory 1-hour training. Have all your managers and supervisors taken the mandatory 2-hour training, because it has to be completed by January 1st. That's the law this year. Everybody has to have taken it this year by January 1st. And since, to the best of my recollection, January 1st is a holiday for most of us, that means it better be completed the day before. Symmetry is offering a complimentary non-harassment training for our clients. If you haven't heard about that, please email info@symmetryhro.com, and we'll get you signed up for that. The state of California is also providing complimentary training as well in multiple languages. So those would be the 2 ways I would do that before the end of the year. And then AB 5. AB 5 was the independent contractor law that was passed, and basically certain parts were expanded, as you know, or you probably know, in the November elections, especially the Uber and Lyft drivers, DoorDash, things like that. But But the bottom line is still this. You may need to make sure you have properly classified all of your independent contractors. Are they truly independent contractors, or are they really employees? And this is somewhat of a complex issue, but that basically entails reading the agreements you have with each of your independent contractors. And then I would recommend having an HR expert or an employment attorney review that and make a determination on whether that person should be more properly classified as an employee. The IRS loves auditing this. The IRS loves going after this type of business and that type of exception. So make sure this is all tied up. It's a big exposure for businesses, especially if you have a lot of independent contractors. It could be really costly if you don't do it right. Okay, so those are the 7 major California changes. Let's talk about, probably in our practice right now, we're getting as many questions about how to manage people effectively from home as any other topic we have. So let me start by saying there's unintended consequences of everything you do, right? So COVID hit and a lot of businesses were able to send everybody home and work from home. Oh, isn't this wonderful? We're able to work from home. But here's a couple of challenges. If you sent your non-exempt employees home, those are people who get paid overtime and meal and rest breaks. How are you tracking that? How do you know they're taking their meal and rest breaks? How do you know they're not working overtime? Are they recording their time? Are they tracking their time? Are you sending them emails, and are they responding after regular business hours? Are they working on weekends? Study came out from Gallup a couple of weeks ago that said the average employee since COVID started is working 80 minutes a day more now than they did before. Well, if that person who's working 80 hours extra a day is a non-exempt employee, you better be paying them overtime. So you want to make sure the critical issue is that they're not working overtime, or if they are, you're paying them for it. And you want to ensure that they're taking their meal and rest breaks. Easiest way to do that is generally once they get their paycheck or confirmation of pay, they turn around and acknowledge that by saying, I promise during this period I've taken all my required meal and rest breaks. But it's something you need to manage that we hadn't thought about before, because most people went to work and came home. But if you have non-exempt employees with access to email from their smartphones and they're looking at it after hours or on the weekends, that's an exposure for you. Onboarding is becoming a big issue. During this crisis, I've hired 2 people. I have met one of them once in February, and I haven't met the other one. And onboarding turns out to be a critical issue. How we're doing it, how do you inculcate them into your culture? How do you define what you want? And there's terrific technology that's helping out these days. But when you have work from home and you're hiring remotely, one of the things I could not more significantly recommend to you is rethink the way you've done it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during hiring, but I think it's really important. For leaders, your attitude with employees who are working from home is one size fits one. I've talked about this for years in terms of leadership, but it's even more important now. Some employees are really anxious and some aren't. Some you can leave alone. Sometimes you need to check in with people more. And just because somebody seems solid doesn't mean they're solid every single day. We all have better days and worse days. Just ask my staff. Others are really worried about everything or their careers, and others are like, c'est la vie. But it's really important to know now your employees more than ever. And one of the things we've talked about is the things that HR used to say you could never do as a leader. Well, don't inquire about their personal life or their family life. This is exactly the thing that's needed now for leaders. How are you doing? What can I do to help? A wonderful employer I know just gave his administrative staff one paid day off on Christmas Day because my director of operations made me do it for them. But until she told me that, I wasn't really aware how much stress there was. It was in the back of my mind, but not the front. And she recommended it, and I think it's a great idea. Remember, the anxiety that people have is 24/7. And people are worried about themselves, their health, their families, their job, their livelihoods. That are their partners, managing their kids or their elderly parents. And it's not like before all this started. If you were having trouble at work, you could go home and forget about it. Or if you're having problems at home, you could go to work and forget about it. This is now a manifested 24/7 stress, and people are handling it in different ways. And I have to tell you, it's extraordinary to me to see the frustration and the anxiety and the stress build up. We have a client in Seattle that is a private school, and the COO is somebody who I've always considered one of the most stable people of all time. She went back east a few weeks ago to attend a wedding. When she came back, the head of school said, why don't you quarantine for a couple of weeks and don't come in? And she was screaming at him so loudly, how dare you say that, that they had to call us and we had to go and kind of mediate the whole situation. And this is from somebody I never would have thought possible. She just snapped. People are likely to snap right now. And we all have to take a deep breath and understand that we're all in this, but people are handling it in different ways. And good leaders react differently to different people, and they try to do the right thing at all time. A lot of businesses have always said, I want to make sure you're getting this all done. I want to make sure you're getting it within the time frame. What are you doing? How are you doing it? And that becomes less important now than just the ability of getting the job done. And I'll give you an example with one of my team, a really valuable team member who worked in the office all along until pandemic. And then she had to come home, and she has 2 school-age kids. And as she says, she's helping them with their schoolwork. She's a babysitter. She's a part-time IT manager. And that comes at the expense of her being able to focus her entire day on her work. And it turns out school is one of the great daycare alternatives of all time, but it doesn't help this situation. So this individual ends up working evenings when her kids are doing their homework, going to school, or fitting in things like before 8 o'clock or when they're doing lunch or things like that. But I'm not going to fire an employee who's been very valuable for being a good mom. I care more about her getting the job done than how or when she does it. And we need to rethink that kind of mentality. It's more important to getting the job done than how you do it or when you do it now. And a lot of people say, well, it's hard for me to trust that. And trust is the essential function right now of leadership. And you trusted them enough to hire them. So I would suggest you extend that trust at this point. Doesn't always work, but I think it's the best thing you can do. And then in terms of communication, tell people the truth. Tell them everything you know. People can handle it. We've handled a lot of bad news in the last 8.5 months. It's okay. People can tell the truth. If we're going to have to shut down business, if we're going to have to shut down the number of employees who work here, tell them as soon as you can. Be honest. Tell them the truth. In a crisis, it's even more important. And then the last thing, and I found this out, is ideas can come from anywhere, not just the boss. And people who are living their lives at home don't often get a chance to express their opinions or ideas. But anybody can come up with an idea. And oftentimes I will say, what's the cheapest, simplest thing we can do that will give us the highest probability of success? And that's really important. So people have ideas, but not everybody in a Zoom meeting is willing to raise their hand and say, I have something I want to talk about. You want to encourage those people to talk, because quiet people have as much to give to the equation as extroverts. As you may know, we have a leadership development program called Tanzanite, and we survey our participants, the several hundred people who participate in our monthly training programs, and we survey them saying, what should we be talking about? What should we be talking about in terms of leadership training? And some of those topics that are most frequently brought up to us are, how do we manage anxiety among ourselves and our employees? And the answer is with resilience. What's the most important thing a leader needs right now? It is to extend and receive trust. Managing this pandemic fatigue is essentially important. Everybody is exhausted. And we're so close to being through the end of it, but we're not there yet. And that is a whole new management style that we have to learn and apply in our own leadership practices. And then rethink the return to the office. I think this is going to be a workforce issue for the next couple of years. And you've seen the statistics. People are leaving downtowns, they're leaving urban areas and going more rural. And the three big cities right now that people are migrating to are Phoenix, Austin, and Boise, Idaho. So what is it going to look like? And a lot of people saying, can we get help? We don't know who should return to the office first or not. And one of the techniques we're talking to businesses about in the redesign of the workspace is it's less who comes back than what you need done in the office. Is it team meetings? Is it group think? What is it that needs to be done in the office? And then start redesigning or rethinking who needs to come as a result of that. A lot of business owners who constantly rejected the possibility of work from home have now said, hey, it's not so bad. I wish they were in the office, but I'll live. This is a rethink that will take place for years and years to come. Some techniques on hiring and firing. Several people on this call are nonprofits. If you have an opening and you're a nonprofit, I have good news for you. There's nothing but great employees, unfortunately, because we think in our area, which is mostly the Western United States, about 25% of people who work for nonprofits have lost their jobs or have been on extended furlough since this all started. And we've had openings that we've helped nonprofit clients fill, and there are hundreds of highly qualified people applying. So that's really great. However, the exact opposite is true in the for-profit world. We have found, and of course there are exceptions to every rule, we have found that most for-profit businesses have shed employees who are least valuable to them. And so two things have happened. The unemployment rate for those types of businesses has not marginally changed in the last few months. It's higher than it was a year ago, but it's still under 7%. So there's not that many people looking for jobs in the for-profit world, and the ones who are looking for jobs really aren't that great to begin with. Otherwise, they would have stayed with their employer, unless the employer went completely out of business. So in both sectors, for-profit or nonprofit, employer executives are saying, do we have to have a full-time employee for this role? So we had an HR person, we had to let that person go. When things get better, do we hire a full-time employee for this, or office administrator or controller? It doesn't really matter, because outsourcing and robotics and artificial intelligence are all starting to play a role in this. Where a person works, do they have to be on site? And so those are also some of the areas you can start rethinking your existing ways of doing things. In terms of interviewing and hiring, it is significantly harder to interview, assess, and select an employee virtually than it is in person. In my career, I've probably interviewed 12,000 people, and I'm pretty good at it. I'm really good at identifying talent, who fits in and who doesn't, but it's harder when you do it virtually. So some techniques, some ideas that we have for you are, if you're going to interview by Zoom or video, there should be more than one person interviewing. And I'm not talking about a panel interview, but I'm talking about more than one person hiring. So we just hired a new senior HR advisor, and I interviewed that person, and two of my other folks interviewed that person as well, and a third person finally did. So you want to have more than one person set eyes on these people, because they'll have different perspectives. They'll bring different thoughts to the table, and they will see things differently than you did. I act differently, for example, on a Zoom call when I do leadership training than I do when I'm on site with my clients. It's easier for me, and it's easier for me to assess how people are doing, if they're completely bored or not. But in this circumstance, I know it's not as effective to interview by Zoom, so I want more people to do it. And I may take more than one interview to do it as well. One of the things I'm looking for in my staff now is technology capability. We've added a lot in my company, technological advancements. We've added Slack, shared drives. We're converting our email system. We're making this different. We have an online project management software we're using. And if people can't adapt quickly to technology, they're simply not as valuable as people who can, because technology is going to drive so much of what we do. So it's one thing to say, I have 12 years of experience as a controller, 6 years of experience as a CFO, but if they can't figure out how to work Slack, and Slack is an essential tool of yours, they're not valuable. And then finally, when you're assessing a candidate, there are a lot of people looking for jobs right now. Your job as an interviewer and an assessor of talent is to figure out, do they want a job working for you, or do they simply want a job? And one of the things I suggest that you do is ask a candidate, what do you know about our company? And or what do you know about me? And I would expect a good candidate to have gone on the website and done some research. Oh, you have 37 employees in 4 locations. You do such and such and such and such. And I looked you up on LinkedIn. And I didn't know you went to this college. My best friend went, that type of thing. If somebody takes the trouble to research you, then they care as much about working for you as they do about having a job. And they will more likely be a long-term success as a result of that. And then I would also reconsider, if you haven't used before, pre-tests, personality tests, skills tests, MBTI, whatever you like, DDI, Colby, any of those things. The more information right now you have, the better decision you will make. And also, if these people are going to be working from home or working in the office, they don't have a chance to see where they're going to be working if they're all interviewing online. I would strongly suggest getting your iPhone out and giving a FaceTime tour of the office. Everybody wants to know what the office looks like, what the setup is, and it's part of your culture. And it's really important to see that. You wouldn't want an employee to get hired, get all fired up. They show up and they're like, this is the worst office I've ever seen. And we've had people have that happen to. So those are the state of hiring. I also want to talk, because there's a number of you in HR and who are hiring HR, and I want to talk about the types of people you need in HR right now, because HR is about to change significantly. A lot of businesses with less than 80 employees need help with benefits or payroll or HR. That title to that person is an HR and payroll administrator or a coordinator. And that job is about a $50,000 a year job right now. Next level is somebody called a generalist. And this is a person with 4 years of experience and has a certification. And these people can answer 80% of employee relations questions without going to a lawyer. And that is, an employee is pregnant, what do I do? We want to terminate an employee, what are the best steps? We want to implement a performance review program or improve what we have. I don't like our onboarding program, what can we do? Those people can do that. Next one is kind of a combination of those. That's an HR manager. Usually the ratio of an HR manager, the number of employees, is about 200 to 300 these days, and the salary range about 110 to 140. Performance management and a more strategic thinker is normally called a director, and they usually have a department of 4 to 7 people working for them in HR. And then finally, an executive level person is a senior VP or a chief people officer or something like that, and that's a really expensive person. And the reason I bring this up is this. If you are an HR professional and you're in the bottom rung, what I would call the benefits payroll administration, that job is about to be eliminated by technology. And I probably can find a way, even without using my company, of saving you, if you're a business owner, a lot of money by doing that. Or you can repurpose that person to do other things of value to your organization. But my best advice to HR people right now is improve your skills, get your certification, start focusing on strategy rather than tactics, because AI and robotics is starting to creep up. And if you're a business owner, rethink how much you're paying. If you have 12 employees, you do not need a director of HR. You probably don't need much of anything other than some technology and occasional outside advice. So rethink that, because it's really important and it's coming very quickly. So having said all of that, here's a post-webinar to-do list for you. Update your employee handbook. Review your minimum wage employees, make sure they're getting paid at least the minimum wage. And by the way, if you have employees moving to states other than here, make sure you're following those laws as well, because employees who work in Idaho have to follow the rules in Idaho. It makes things more complex, but it's there. That means you're going to have somebody who's familiar with Idaho laws and regulations, or Connecticut rules and regulations for that matter. Make sure you've reviewed your exempt and exempt employees, that they are doing duties that are commensurate with them being exempt or non-exempt. And if they are exempt, they hit that minimum salary threshold as well. Same thing with independent contractor agreements. Review those agreements or have an expert do them. Brand new COVID prevention plan in writing. And then if you have multiple layers of management, do all your hiring managers know how to interview and hire and onboard in this virtual world? Do they know the questions they can and cannot ask in this world? For a couple of years, most states have had a law that prevents an interviewer from asking, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Have you ever been arrested for a felony? A lot of hiring managers, 40% we survey, don't know that. So you want to make sure that people who are hiring know what to ask and not ask. And then in this return to the office world, what can we convert to make us more efficient? What technologies? What can we remote? What can we outsource? A lot of that is overwhelming for people. And if you are a Symmetry client, and there's a lot of you on the line today, talk to your HR advisor. We'll walk you through it. We'll streamline for you, not a problem. If you don't, employment counsel, always something we recommend, legal counsel, making sure that happens. If you would like some help of the type of thing we've seen today, please contact us and we'll give you a complimentary 15-minute evaluation. You can talk to one of our HR folks and say, here's what's needed, here are the things you need to think about, and we might be able to streamline your business and your processes and be more efficient. And finally, I just want to thank you for listening to me talk nonstop for 40 minutes. Not even my wife puts up with that. The website in red is where you go and you can download the update, the white paper, which has all the details of all the laws we've talked to about, the minimum wage by municipality chart, and also that template for the COVID prevention plan that you can download. So all those three things are available to you. And I don't see any questions, Jamie, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if they're out there. Okay, here we go. First one, do your California employees need to take the harassment training through your organization, or can you accept a training certificate issued by another organization or institution for your employee? For example, we have some employees who do work at UCLA and they did their harassment training through UCLA. Do they still need to do the training from your organization, or can we accept the UCLA certificate? As long as it was done this year and the provider they had is qualified to do it in California, I assume UCLA is. Yes, the answer is yes, you could do that, but it has to have been done this year. You're welcome. Okay, I don't see a lot more. So again, best recommendation I have, if you're a Symmetry client, I think you need to have somebody walk you through this. Our folks will do that as part of your package. That's not a problem. Your employment attorney is an excellent resource. We're happy to talk if you're neither of those things. And I just wanted to thank all of you for your time today and for the joy of having to listen to me. I think I will take a little nap now and relax. There's two other questions that just came through. Do exempt salary minimums also pertain to scientists? Yes, the answer is yes. Anybody who's exempt. And then another question, if an employee works remotely and has a positive COVID test, should you still report it? You only need to report it if they've been on the work premises for the last 14 days, your employer work site. Now, if they have like a WeWork space, call your attorney. But if somebody has been outside of their primary workspace, which is your office, for over 14 days, you don't need to report it. So, but I think that will do it. If you have any more questions, feel free to email info@symmetryhro.com. Couple other ones. When evaluating employee size regarding the new California laws, is that nationwide or just pertaining to employees in California? As I know it, the California Family Rights Act applies to businesses with 50 or more employees in a 75-mile radius. And I hope that helps. Thank you all for your time. I hope you have a great Wednesday. And if you need anything, info@symmetryhro.com. Call your HR advisor. I hope you have a great day. Happy New Year. And I think next year is going to be a lot better. Thank you all so much.